All right, we've got a recording going, and hi everyone who's watching this being recorded. We have one student live, and I apologize for the delay in starting our recording today, but the student who attended live was very kind about it, and we talked about some of his specific questions. And now I'm going to launch into the more general discussion of Bluebook and how to use it, and then general writing techniques, okay? Now, of course, if anyone has very specific questions, you are welcome to call, email, set up a Skype with me during office hours. Just please do bear in mind, you want to do this sooner than later because my experience is when a paper's coming due, all my appointments fill up with students wanting to ask last-minute questions. So you may want to get ahead of the curve and reach out to me a couple weeks in advance, okay? We're actually already to a couple weeks in advance, so please do feel free to reach out to me, but I don't recommend waiting until the last minute. And Armando, if you'll do me a favor, will you go ahead and mute your mic right now? And then if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute. All right, guys. So I'm going to start with the basics. I'm going to assume, hopefully, that most of you have already had some experience with the Bluebook. If you didn't, you've at least purchased it or bought it online. I don't purchase it every year, so I'm still working from the 19th edition. The 20th edition is the one that's out currently. For those of you who are going to law school, which is quite a bit of the class, you're probably going to be working with the 20th in law school too. So how do you use the Bluebook? Yeah, it's daunting. And again, I'm trying to combine, some students already are familiar with it, some students aren't. So I'm going to try to kind of address everybody. The first thing you can do when you have a question about citation, and of course Bluebook is the legal citation that's used throughout the country for lawyers, judges, and legal scholars. The first thing you can do is go to the front index or the back index, and I'm kind of zooming in a little. Hopefully it's fairly visible, but what you should be able to see is that it is a very quick reference to the most commonly used types of citation. So for example, the very first quick reference on the inside cover is case law. And for most of you, this is something you're really going to need to reference, and it shows you how you cite a case. Now, you can get into more specifics, but this is really good reference, okay? Same with the back cover. It's mostly the same list, but with different examples, okay? Cases, statutes, newspapers, journals, internet sources, all of these are listed in their most common referenced form. Once you get to law school, you're going to have to know a lot more about the meat and potatoes in the middle of the book, okay? There's a lot of fine points to legal citation. But for 90% of what you're doing for my class, the front and the back covers are going to give you the information you need. But let's say that's not enough. Let's say you have something unusual that's more than just a case citation or a statutory citation. The next place you can look is, again, near the very front of the book. You want to get up to the light blue pages, okay? Not all the pages in the Bluebook are blue. Some are white. But at the very beginning, you start a section that's about 20 pages long, okay, of light blue colored pages. These are also the most commonly asked questions that people have. So for example, how do you put together, if you have more than one citation, how do you put them together? We call that a string citation. So let's say you write a sentence that the Supreme Court has found that the death penalty is legal. Well, of course, the Supreme Court has found that the death penalty is legal repeatedly in many, many different cases. And you may want to cite more than one case. So you'll create a string citation. You will have case Jones versus Smith, and then you'll have case Anderson versus Brown, and so on. The light blue pages show you how to set that up, okay? And just a heads up, you put a semicolon before the cases, between the cases, okay? That's what you're going to learn if you look at the blue pages. Another common issue that comes up in the blue pages, and this is something I look for specifically in legal writing, is how to use signals. Hopefully all of you learned what signals are in legal research and legal writing, but a signal is an introduction to your citation. And in legal writing, you have to do an introduction to your citation most of the time. So when you go into the blue section at the beginning, and hopefully everyone can see this, there's a provision, and I'm trying to get it way up close on the camera, and then I'll read it out loud, called Citations, Sentences, and Clauses. And in there, it starts telling you how to put your sentences together, and then you flip to the next page, and how to use your signals. Now, the most common signal is going to be C, S-E-E. And you use SEE to introduce the citation you're about to use. There's other signals such as see also, there's see generally, there's but see. There's a number of signals, and you go into the light blue pages to find out how to use your signals. Now I want to take a second to see if I can find in the light blue a list of the most common signals that I'm going to put up on the camera, if I can find it quickly. Although this does bring up a good point. You can't expect to find things like this in Bluebook, okay? It does take some time to look up whatever you're looking up. So please don't leave your Bluebook till the last hour before the assignment's due. You need to give yourself a few hours to get your Bluebook citations correct. And right now, as you can see, I'm just literally flipping through the light blue pages because I am fairly certain it's in here, but then I could be wrong. Okay. All right. Well, because I'm not finding it quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the third method of finding what you need to find in Bluebook, okay? If it's not on the inside cover or the back cover, that means it's not super quick reference, and you don't find it easily in the light blue pages, the next step is to go into the index, okay? And that's what we're going to do for signals. It's perfect. It's a perfect example because you need to know what signals are, and we need to talk about how you find things in Bluebook, so it works very well. So the index is at the very back of the book. All right, it's the white pages at the back of the book. Here's just, you'll see how it's laid out, not like any type of research index. You look for your word. Once you find your word, you scroll down and try to narrow it down to exactly what you're looking for. So in our case, and if you're following along with your Bluebook, I want you to find the word signals in the index. Obviously, it's under S. So lucky for me, my book opened to S. And there we go. All right, so in the 19th edition, in the index, signals is at the bottom of page 505. Now, the problem is, of course, it's not just one page in all the Bluebook about signals. There's a lot of information about signals and how you use them. So what we need to do is, now that we found it in the index, we need to find the page that best relates to what we want to know, which all I'm trying to find out right now is where I can find the list of different signals, because I want to show it to you guys. So I'm looking through, I'm scanning through the options for signals, and I see generally. Generally is always a good one. Ooh, let's see if I can get this onto the camera. Generally is always a good place to go when you're just looking up basics, okay? So general information about signals is on pages, in the 19th edition, is on pages 54 to 56. Which we're going to go back to page 54, 56. Let's see if I was wrong. I thought it was going to be in the light blue pages, but it's not. All right, page 54, just like the index told me to go to. And there we see up a little higher, let me scroll for the camera, we see the title right there on page 54, Introductory Signals. And here we get the list of what the different signals are, okay? Kind of scrolling up to give you a flavor for some of them. Now, I don't expect you guys to use every signal under the sun. That's not the idea. But I do want to see that you know how to use a signal. So let's focus on the most common one I expect you guys to use in your papers, and that is C. Okay? Just C. And here's a paragraph that explains to you when you use C. Cited authority that clearly supports your proposition. So again, if you have you state in your paper, the U.S. Supreme Court has affirmed the use of the death penalty in Florida, and you have a case that, boom, says, it's literally from the U.S. Supreme Court supporting the death penalty in Florida, then you write, as soon as you finish that sentence, you'll put a period after your sentence, then you'll put the signal C, and you will put it in italics. The symbols are always in italics or underlined. I prefer italics. Underline's correct, but it looks a little old-fashioned. It's from back when everyone used typewriters. So you put the signal C in italics or underlined, and then you put the title of the case, because that's how you cite a case. So let's say our case was Consuelo v. Ravitch. Okay? So Consuelo v. Ravitch would be also italicized or underlined, and then you would complete the citation, which, if you don't know how to complete the citation for the case itself, again, go back to just the front index Just go back to the front index of Bluebook, okay? And it shows you how to cite a case. It shows you the examples. Now, let's say the examples don't really work for you, though. You're like, Dr. Conslow, I'm not an example person. I want the rule actually explained to me. If you want the rule explained to you on how to cite a case, hopefully you're already realizing what you do. You go to the index. So you would go to the back of the Bluebook, you go to the index, look up case, all right, under C, which is what I'm doing right now. And there is so much about cases, but case names is on page 479. And then whatever you want to know about how you cite a case, you would start following those pages, okay? That's if you don't like the quick reference. It's all personal style at this point. Now, once you get to law school, I do not recommend you just do quick reference, just because your law school legal research and writing professors are going to give you tricky things that are not going to be on the quick reference index in the front of the book, okay? Your legal research and writing professors are going to expect you to be using the index and finding the technical methods of citation, okay? For me, again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but most of what you will need to do, you're going to be able to find in the quick reference in the front or back of Bluebook, okay? Now, again, Armando's the only person on the line with me live, so let me just ask him if he has any questions. If he doesn't, then I'm going to, actually, I'm just going to think for a second if there's anything else I really want to cover about Bluebook citation. All right, I'm not hearing from Armando, so I think he's good. Beside making sure you put everything in Bluebook, or, and I put this in the assignment, the option is to use Florida Rule of Appellate Procedure 9.800. If that is what you learned in legal research and writing, then I will accept it. But please remember to put at the top of your paper some message to me, or in the comment box, Dr. Conslow, I used Florida Rule of Appellate Procedure 9.800. Everyone else, I'm going to expect you to follow Bluebook, okay? And Bluebook's my preference. And if you're planning to go to law school and you want the practice, definitely use Bluebook, okay? Definitely make sure you use your signals. Make sure you put the citations properly into the paper. If you want to use footnotes, that's okay. You can do in-text citations or you can do footnote citations, but they're going to look the same, all right? Whether you do footnotes or in-text, you still have to use signals. You still have to properly italicize. You still have to put a period at the end of the citation. So doing footnotes doesn't get you out of any of the rules of citation. It's just rather than put it in the text after each and every sentence, what you would do is you would put a footnote after the sentence and then put the citation. And that does remind me of one other thing I want to bring up. One of the common flaws, there's a couple common errors I see in capstone papers. One, failure to put in your citations. Really, with legal writing, quite honestly, at least 90% of the sentences should be cited. Even if all you're doing is repeating the exact same citation from the sentence before. So if, again, back to my U.S. Supreme Court example, let's say you state the Florida Supreme Court has affirmed the death penalty, and then you put the citation. And then your next sentence is, the reason the U.S. Supreme Court supports the death penalty is because it is allowed under the U.S. Constitution. And let's say that information, that sentence, came from the exact same case you already cited. That's fine, but you have to cite it again. Now, hopefully for everybody, this rings a bell. If you're using the exact same citation twice in a row, using the same case law or the same statute twice in a row, you don't have to rewrite the whole cite. And in fact, you really shouldn't. You just use ID, period. So in this case, what you would say is see id, okay? Because you still need your signal even when you're working with id. But what id means is it's the same citation. You're telling your reader, listen, it's the same citation I already used before. I'm not rewriting it for you. So see ids are fine. But a sentence that doesn't have a citation at all, that's a problem. And there should be very, very few of those, because if you're asserting something in legal writing, you have to have a foundation for it. Your opinion or your thoughts are not adequate in legal writing. That's people's opinions and thoughts are more appropriate in a journalistic or editorial type of writing. In legal writing, everything you say should come from a legal source, whether it's a case, a statute, a journal article, a newspaper article, congressional laws, what have you. Okay, so everything needs a citation, and that is the number one problem I see in capstone papers is people will maybe cite 3 or 4 of their sentences out of 5 pages of text. That's a real problem. The other thing I see as a problem is people not using signals, and I think that's because some legal research and writing professors were not teaching signals, but I've gone over it, so there's really no excuse here. And then people just, the third big problem I find is people just making up citations, just completely off the wall. I don't even know where they came from. I'm fairly familiar with APA citations, and occasionally I'll see students using APA, and of course you lose points for that because APA is not used in legal writing at all. But at least it's a form of citation. I've also had students just completely make up citation, like it came from nowhere, and that's a major problem. So you do want to be doing your very best to follow Bluebook, or if not Bluebook, Florida Rule of Appellate Procedure 9.800, okay? So those are that's my overarching, hey, this is how we use Bluebook, this is how you can find your citations, and these are what I expect in your paper to demonstrate a basic knowledge of legal citation. So let's turn now to going over some basic legal writing techniques, okay? This is moving away from citation and more into general writing concepts. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually pulling up the assignment itself right now on my screen. I'm going to, in a moment, if Skype works for me, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Share my screen, share my screen, share my screen. Okay. Alrighty, so let's go to the assignment itself. Alright, so you guys should all have read this very carefully. This is a significant part of your grade in capstone. You've probably noticed by now there's a lot of very easy assignments in capstone. The experiential learning is meant to be it's supposed to be a good learning event, but one that everyone should get 100 on, okay? There's quite a few of those assignments. Class participation is something everyone should get 100 on. But the legal research and writing paper is not an easy 100 by any means at all. So please do make sure you're reading the assignment parameters. This is your Gordon Rule writing assignment. Every major at UCF has 2 papers that students need to write under the Gordon Rule. One you did during legal writing, and your second one is this paper in your senior capstone, okay? You do need to use at least 2 different types of primary sources and at least 1 secondary source. Keep in mind, primary sources are case law, statutes, and constitutions. There's some exceptions, but basically those are the 3 types of primary sources. Secondary sources are basically everything else, okay? If you cite a newspaper or a journal article or scholarly writing, that's great, but that is your secondary source. So please do make sure you have 2 different kinds of primary. So if you're writing a paper based in Florida and all you use is 2 different Florida statutes, that's not 2 different types of primary sources. That's both Florida statutes. So make sure you're using a Florida statute and a federal statute, or a Florida statute and Florida case law, or a Florida statute and the Florida Constitution. Okay, they have to be different. And then at least 1 secondary source. And they all need to be cited correctly per Bluebook or Florida Rule Appellate Procedure 9.800. The paper should be about 5 pages long. Now, I'm a little flexible on this, and here's the reason why. I used to say exactly 5 pages, and then I'd have students getting so creative with their margins and their font, and I would become like the font police. And I don't want to be the font police. So I expect you to write, if you're a sentence short, or a sentence too long, that's fine. Even if you're 2 sentences short of 5 pages or 2 sentences too long, that's fine. But if there's a half a page missing, or your font is like 10, or your font's like 14 point to try to, make your paper seem longer, or my favorite, you're putting spaces between every paragraph. Oh no, my very favorite is, or your title takes up the entire first half of the first page. None of these things count, okay? This is very common sense. I want to see about pretty close to 5 pages, 12 point, Times New Roman, double spaced with 1-inch margins. Please don't fudge it. You're just giving me a headache, and you really don't want me to have a headache when I'm grading your paper. If you don't make it to 5 pages, just accept you haven't come up with 5 pages, and I'll see it, and we're done. Don't double space your paragraphs. Don't make your title page a half a page long. Please don't give me 14 or 16 point font. I can tell all these things, and it just makes me think you're trying to fudge your paper. So just be straightforward. Try to get to the 5 pages. There's no reason on earth everyone shouldn't be able to write 5 pages as a senior legal writing student. There shouldn't be a problem. But if it is, just be straightforward about it. Don't fiddle around. I do expect all the papers to use proper FIRAC, and that's because it's what we learn in legal studies as undergraduates, and it is most certainly what you're going to learn in law school and what you're going to be graded on in law school. So if you don't remember what FIRAC is and you didn't do the module yet, please make sure you do the module I put into this online course all about legal research and writing, because it talks about FIRAC and there's a good video about FIRAC. But basically what FIRAC is, to remind everybody, it's when you are describing case law. And I expect most likely most of the class is going to use some case law in their paper. So when you're describing a case, you have to summarize it for your reader, because cases can be 100 pages long, and you need to break it down for your reader into a few paragraphs. And that's what FIRAC teaches us to do. So FIRAC stands for facts, issue, rule, analysis, and conclusion. Okay, and so for every case you want to do a quick explanation of the facts, but only the facts as they relate to what you're using the case for in your paper. Then the issue. Again, many cases have multiple issues. You only talk about the issue that relates to your paper. The rule. Many rules used in cases. You know, a judge may refer to a statute and refer to other cases and refer to a constitution. You only reference the rules that relate to your paper and your proposition. Then analysis, you're going to want to talk about how the court analyzed the facts and compared them to the rule, and then finally came up with their conclusion. And you're going to say what the court concluded and tie it into your own case, okay? So please do use FIRAC when you're dealing, and I'm sorry for the background noise. That is actually my Rottweiler, who apparently has an upset stomach. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I can hear it, so I don't know if it's distracting. I apologize if it is. With statutes or constitutions, you don't use FIRAC. FIRAC is just for case law. When you're using statutes, constitutions, journal articles, you just kind of explain it, okay? The reason law schools came up with FIRAC is because case law is so confusing. They needed to give students a way, almost like a checklist to explain the case in their writing. But I think the theory was that statutes and constitutions and journal articles, they're not as confusing, and so most students intuitively know how to explain it. Okay, that's why I think FIRAC came about for case law. Whatever reason it came about, FIRAC is part of the law school experience. It is the expected method of briefing a case when you're going to court or for partners in a law firm, whether you're a paralegal or an associate. So you do need to know how to do FIRAC, and this is a good practice if you're using case law in your paper. Okay, moving on. Quotations. This is something I occasionally see is students will get to 5 pages by making 3 of the pages quoted material. Please don't do that. It's limited to 10%. No, I'm not counting every single word in your paper, but I can pretty much eyeball it and see if like a third of your paper is quotation. So don't do that. Quotes certainly have their place in legal writing, but the purpose of legal writing is to explain a legal topic to your reader, not just quote what someone else said about the topic. Okay, so you can use quotes. Make 100% sure you attribute the quote to the source. You put quotations around it and you cite it. Otherwise, it's plagiarism. And I have had that happen in capstone where students have quoted a lot of material and passed it off as their own. And that is most definitely a golden rule violation. It's cheating. It can get you sent to the student conduct board. So if you do quote, attribute it properly. And of course, that's just proper writing. If you quote, you should use quotations and you should cite the source of material. Okay, finally, in the assignment, you can't get help from anyone. I literally had a student run her Gordon Rule paper by another professor and did not tell the other professor why she was having him read it over. He apparently thought it was just something she was trying to write for a journal, and it came out that he had given her assistance, and of course she failed the paper because she actually had a professor help her. But you can't get assistance from anyone, okay? Not other students in the class, not your roommate, not professors. The only exception to that is you are welcomed and encouraged to meet with the UCF librarians to help you with research. And I've given you Richard Gauss's contact information. He's very helpful if you're struggling with how to do your research. Second, you can go to the UCF Writing Center and get help from the Writing Center student advisors. Just one word of caution, I've had a lot of students do that in the past, and most of the time they find it not helpful. The reason why is that legal writing is so unique and legal citation is so unique that unless you're lucky enough to get a student advisor who is a legal studies major, who's already had legal research and writing, you're not going to get the kind of assistance you want. So you're welcome to go to the Writing Center, but please do be aware it may be a waste of your time. Okay, and then how am I going to grade this paper? I'm going to double check your sources, make sure your sources are accurate and they stand for the proposition you say they stand for. Then I'm going to check and make sure that you did your citations right. Did you use Bluebook? Did you use Bluebook correctly? Did you rely on too much unquoted material? Did you attribute your quoted material correctly? The sources, so basically in my mind I look at the research, finding your sources, and the citation, properly citing your sources and attributing material to your sources, to be about half the purpose of this paper. So the two things combined together are about 50% of your grade. The other 50% is your writing. Is the information you conveyed correct? Do you organize it well? Are there typos, or did you do a good job proofreading it? Did you make the page limit or the page parameters? And all of that is the other 50% of your grade. So we've talked about citations already. I've recommended that if you're struggling in finding your sources, you go talk to Richard Gauss in the library. I think it's probably self-explanatory that the information you convey should be correct. So let's just take a minute or two to talk about that fourth element of your grade, which is writing quality. Writing quality is really important. You need to remember to organize your paper. And I find most students do an excellent job of this. It's very rare I have a student whose paper doesn't make sense. But it's still worth saying you want to have an introductory paragraph, you want to have a concluding paragraph, and in the middle you want to lay out your information in an organized fashion. This usually relates to having point sentences at the start of each paragraph to tell me what you're about to write about. What's also very important is to proofread. I find the difference between an A paper and a B paper is usually the proofreading. An A paper does not have errors because it's been proofread. It doesn't have typos, it doesn't have double quotation marks, it doesn't have misspellings because it's been proofread. I have noticed in a lot of the assignments that have been turned in so far in this class, there's a definite line between students who are proofreading what they turn in and students who aren't. I have not been counting off for it on the journal entries. I make note of it and I'm kind of like, oh, this student really didn't try very hard, but I don't count off for it in the journal entries. But on the capstone paper, poor writing as far as grammar, typos, it will cost you. Writing quality is 25% of the grade, so please do at a bare minimum make sure you reread your work at least once, if not twice. Please make sure it's organized, that you have your opening paragraph, your closing paragraph, point sentences to every paragraph. Get to the 5 pages without fiddling your margins, and I think that's about it. Those are kind of the highlights of what I am looking for in your legal research and writing paper. So at this point, we're about half hour in. No one else has joined. It's still just me and Armando. So I'm just going to see if anyone else was trying to call in. I'm checking my emails. No one else was. So at this point, pretty much wrapped up. If Armando, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. But otherwise, what I'm going to do is just say, if you're struggling during your paper, one thing is, make sure you go back and read the module on legal research and writing. That's why I put it in this class, is to give you some really good reference material. There's some really good videos. Call Richard Gauss to help you with your research. Call me if you're confused about Bluebook or some element of legal writing. And then just don't procrastinate. Don't put it off to the last minute. I have had some papers that have been so good they have blown my mind, and I've most definitely told those students, use this as a writing sample when you're applying to law school, or if you're going right into the workforce, use this as a writing sample of what you can accomplish for your new employer. So these papers, if they're done well, not only will it get you an A, which is a good thing, but it can be used for professional and academic, future professional and academic endeavors. But make sure you put the effort into it, okay? And then also bear in mind, if you're kind of on the flip side and you're like, listen, I'm just trying to get through this class. I'm not trying to write the Mona Lisa of legal writing literature. Okay, But also bear in mind that you have to have a C in this class to pass. And every semester I teach, I think every semester I've had at least one student who did not pull a C. So don't blow the paper off, okay? You got to have a C in the class to pass capstone. You don't want to just blow this paper off and have it sink your grade, okay? And I'm here. If there's any questions, you know where to reach me, and I hope this video has been helpful. Really do. All right. And that's it.